Hi everyone.
Hello and welcome to yet another wonderful day here at the online summit Connecting Soul Beings. It is my great pleasure to introduce you today to Shauna Pelton. Shauna's from the USA and she's a transformational expert. Now she takes spirituality to a different level. She actually ensures that we also know about it, what it means on a scientific level and what it does to our body and our brain. We talk about fear, we talk about the stories, and we also learn how hormones have an impact on the body and our spiritual experience. This is a very unusual conversation and I loved every moment of it, and I'm sure you will too. So grab your cup of coffee or tea and enjoy the conversation.
My name is Shauna Pelton. I have been doing some sort of healing work for the past 18 years now. And it's kind of evolved itself because I have evolved. Of course, my needs have evolved. And it began with me, as most people will share their own story about healing and what they needed to overcome. You know, the dark night of the soul, and I'm no different. And that began actually, you know, in truth, I'll tell that story after, but I'll just share what I do. So 18 years of doing transformational healing work through energy medicine, through spiritual teachings, through hypnotherapy, neuro-linguistic programming, so working on the mind. I've also studied under biontology, which is the study of nature being light, but the biophysicist I studied under was Johann Fritz. Why can't I remember how to pronounce his last name? Boswinkle. I'm sorry, Johann Boswinkle.
Wow.
I know, right? And Johann Boswinkle actually studied under Fritz Popp. That's where the Fritz came in.
Yes.
Fritz Popp actually studied biophotons, which is how all living things are animated by light, literally, information packages of light. And so anyway, I've been working with mind, body, energy, spirit for healing and transformation. And it began because, I'll tell you the story, had a defining moment, as most people will come to in their lives, and they realize they can't keep doing the same old thing they've been doing. And I had lost my son's father to addictions. I was a very young mom, a young single mom. And I remember having a moment where I was on all kinds of medications for many problems, mental, emotional, and physical problems that were debilitating for me. And I remember my son being a toddler, and I remember coming home, looking at him in the eyes, and I said to myself, after my son's father's death, I went, you know, I can't keep doing what I've been doing. I can't go down this path because I will also lose my life. I was so clear of that as my destiny if I continued my path.
Wow.
Like, it was something that was saying to me, you're going to die this way unless you change.
Yeah.
And when I looked at him, Bianca, I said, I have to show him how to live. I have to show him how to overcome a challenge that he's inevitably going to have. I mean, don't we all go through life challenges? Who doesn't go
definitely.
through life?
Unavoidable.
Right, exactly. And so in that moment, that defining moment, I said, I'm going to find a way. And so he was my why I needed to heal. And then I started looking at alternatives. Now, this was at a time that, well, first of all, like, the internet really wasn't a thing. I mean, it was available, not to me. I didn't have it. But it was, I had to go to the library and go to, like, you know, seek for obscure knowledge on how to heal my life. And it was that through that journey that I was really able to start to get excited about what was available, started to apply some of the things that I was learning. And then I had another why. So after I started healing my life, I was like, people don't know this.
No.
People are struggling. They are sick, suffering, and they're struggling, and they think they need to take more medications and continue to go down the path that they've been on, which is usually the medical model.
Yeah.
And I wanted to provide them with another way. And so then I started my path of being a professional healer and coach. So that's how it all began. That's the long, I was going to say the short story. It wasn't so short.
No. We can't really avoid the long story, because I think it's really important for people to understand what we have been through as well.
Yeah.
Yesterday I had a conversation with one of the other speakers, Lee Jane, and we were sort of talking about the darkness that we may go through for us to learn, so that we are able to teach other people as well. And because I sometimes feel that people have this expectation that we can never be in a dark place, because we teach people how to heal, we teach people how to connect, we teach people how to be who we are. But there is no every day is, hallelujah, I'm alive type scenario. You know what I mean? We do go through, like you say, the challenges and the struggles. And perhaps for us, we might be able to get out of them quicker, but we still allow ourselves to go through it. But we don't necessarily dwell into that, but it becomes part of our story. And I think it's really important for us to acknowledge what we have experienced and how did we get to where we are today. And so thank you for sharing that, because it's so important for us to recognize that.
No, you really just brought up a few good points, actually. And, one of them is that we're not perfect. But we're not even, it's not realistic to expect everyday ease in such a way that's like, my life is good, everything's good, rainbows and butterflies all the time. Yeah. That's not actually realistic. And as a matter of fact, it brings up
excuse me.
It brings up a point about this concept that I teach. It's called being in right relationship with what you fear or what triggers you. And so, right relationship means how you relate and interact. Relate means how I feel and what I think about it. Interact is what I do once I'm triggered, right? And so that right there is the skill that I needed to learn in order to navigate my world, because we're going to constantly go through cycles of death and rebirth over and over again as long as we're alive. I don't know, maybe after this lifetime, we might still go through cycles of death and rebirth. And if we can learn the skills of navigating that journey, then we can be empowered. And I actually term it as being sovereign, right? Sovereign is such a powerful word. I'm curious, what does sovereign mean to you?
Sovereign, for me, it means, it actually makes me feel really clean. Sovereign, it's like cleanliness, it's beauty, it's being whole in that way. Yeah, that's how it makes me feel when I hear sovereign.
Nice. I love hearing how people feel when they hear that word. I feel free when I hear sovereign. And freedom doesn't mean problems don't exist. It means problems don't take me down as like they once did. Yeah. I have a new engagement with them, a new contract, if you would. The symbolism for me, like I use a peacock in all of my everything that I put out there. Everything's peacock, because I learned that the peacock, I'm so sorry. The peacock is the symbol for the noble self, the noble sovereign self. Yeah. And it's the journey after, how like people think about the symbolism of the phoenix. Have you ever heard of the phoenix rising?
Yes.
It's that firebird, right?
Yeah.
Where it rises up from the ashes. And it's this like magnificent phoenix, which is transformation. Well, after the fire settles down, what happens is the peacock is then expressed, which is beautiful, is noble, the royal sovereign self. I'm free to be me, and I'm beautiful, like, you know, like that concept. More than aesthetically beautiful, but like, because I went through what I went through, I am better off in this new position. I see things in a new way. I relate to things in a new way. When I found forgiveness in the worst of the worst times I ever went through with the people who caused me the greatest pain, that right there in that moment, everything changed for me. And that's when I felt free. That's when I felt sovereign. That's when I felt like I embodied something new.
Yeah, beautiful. It's a really good way to explain that, actually. For me, the peacock is all about, there's this saying in Australia based on this series that used to be called Kath and Kim. I don't know if you've heard of it before. Hilarious series. It was a comedy. And it was all about, you know, when the mother didn't get attention from the daughter, she would say, look at me, look at me. It's really Aussie way of saying it. So when I hear peacock, it's all about that, you know, look at me, but it's more on the outside. Whereas you now explain it that the peacock also has that from the inside out. And I've always perceived the peacock to be more external. You know, I want to focus externally because I want the attention. I want to be the center of that attention as well. I want people to see that I'm beautiful and fun and social and, you know, all of that. So it's really interesting to hear your analogy of the peacock. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Another way of looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. And I noticed that too because you've got the peacock on your website. So thanks for explaining, because I was wondering what's the connection there.
Yeah. Actually, you know, I love it. I love it. You have an owl mug. I should get a peacock mug.
Oh yes.
I love that.
Owls,
I love it. All your colors too.
They have a really big meaning for me. Actually, I posted a photo last night. There was an owl in our backyard on the jacaranda tree, and it was they called them a tawny frogmouth owl. And I've never seen an owl like that. Just free, you know, I've never seen an owl like that. So my grandmother used to collect owls. And so every time I see an owl or I have an owl like that, I always connect to my grandma straight away. And she's sometimes around me as well. So every time I see an owl, I know that she's coming soon or she's already here to come and visits. So for me, owls have always had that connection to my grandma, but also, you know, it really helps me to allow the wisdom to come through. When I think of an owl, it's almost like it opens up a bit of a gateway for me to help the connections. So to allow that wisdom and the messages to come through. Yeah.
I love that. I believe in that. I think that spirit communicates with us through symbolism, you know, and we, I think the thing that we have all throughout history, what we can always count on are symbols and stories that get passed on. And there's meaning in these images that we see, you know, and it helps us to remember who we are. It helps us to stay connected to our ancestors and the meaning that they have for us. Like when I think about grandmother, I think about the great realm of understanding, because the grandmother, think about it, she just sits and like, she's so loving, right? Yes. And she's very understanding and she's nurturing and she takes you in and she's like, hey, everything's okay, come to me, I'll feed you.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's my grandmother.
And unconditionally too, right? Yeah,
right.
Very much so. Yeah.
That's it. That's wonderful. So we were talking about the symbolism. My speaking of symbolism. So my dog is starting to paw at me. If you hear anything, I apologize.
Okay. We've got our furry friends with us all the time, right? I've got them laying here too. So.
Yeah, so we were just talking about, I think, right relationship
Yes.
with things that challenge us, and to be reminded to, you know, keep moving forward, and to have a sense of all is well, and to not give up, and to keep, focusing on really what's calling you forward versus what's frightening you and what's reminding you of your past fears and pains and future worries and concerns, that sort of thing. I really learned about, one of the things that when I think about my own personal transformation, and also what I help people with a lot with, no. My dog's literally gnawing at my chair.
Oh.
Sorry. Hold on. Where was I? Remind me of what I was saying.
Oh, you were talking about the fears and being frightened of them from the past? Yeah.
So one of the things that I realized, and what kept me, remember I mentioned I had overcome great challenges, and I had incredibly difficult challenges physically, mentally, emotionally. It was just, it was very difficult for me to overcome. And I had learned that I was programmed, and my stories that I told myself stopped me from progressing, stopped me from moving forward. And then in working with others, that's the big thing that I hear most often, is that people are afraid. It's like their fear. They know they have fear, but they don't know how to overcome that fear, right?
Yeah.
And so they stay stuck in an old pattern that keeps them in this, an identity, if you would, right? And an identity that is based on their old conditioning and who they used to be, how they used to show up in the world, and they don't know how to break free from that pattern and move beyond it.
Yeah.
And therefore, people are also saying that they don't have a sense of purpose in life. Life doesn't have the same sense of meaning to them, right? And that's a big struggle for a lot of folks.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are in that space because they don't have the tools to apply for them to get out of it. And then it becomes like this big black hole that you find yourself going through all the time. And I think fear as well, when I work with my clients, in particular connecting to animals, they have this fear of, we'll never be able to hear them, or what comes through is not real. So, and fear I've experienced is really closely related to trust, because they're not often trusting either themselves, the experience, or the animals, whatever that is, right? So fear can be confused with, I'm not trusting this yet, and therefore it frightens me.
Right.
So
that's such a brilliant connection that you just made. And it has to do, fear is in the brain, right? Because fear has to do with our past, whether it's our own past experiences. And this is what I suppose, if people who are listening are interested in this, fear is not only our own experiences that we've had difficulties with, but it's also passed on to us. No one had taught us how to be afraid of fire. Or we, you know what I mean? We just knew it. We came into this world and we just kind of knew, don't touch fire. Or don't, cross a busy street. There's an instinct that we have. But that's the animal instinct. That's the fear-based animal instinct. And it's actually, neuroscience teaches us, it's based in our amygdala. Right? The place in our brain that stores or at least all of this part of our brain that stores those memories that are passed on to us, and our own fears as well. And so fear actually has a way of causing, biologically speaking, it releases a chemical, or a few chemicals, a family of chemicals, but cortisol and adrenaline are a couple that come to mind.
Yeah.
Now, most people are familiar with cortisol because they'll say like their whole digestive area, their stomach area stores cortisol fat, and that's stress-related fat. Have you ever heard anyone say that? It's like, oh, I'm gaining weight right in my middle.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
that's because we are on this like high fear state rather, and releasing a lot of cortisol in our bloodstream, and we are stuck. It's as if the switch is stuck on, and they're not really, in a past state, like when fear came in handy, it was when we were running away from saber-toothed tigers. Like that's when it was useful.
Yeah, yeah.
And now it's like, hey, look, I have a deadline at work, or I have to make money to meet my mortgage, or pay my mortgage, or like things that are not real threats, but they're perceived threats, and we are constantly in a state of fear, which is so hazardous to our health. It causes inflammation in our bodies. It literally downregulates our genetics, our DNA. We have transcription genes, and the genes that are for health and wholeness shut off, but the genes that are for disease and illness, those get turned on.
Yeah.
So it has this like cascade effect, and it really affects us on a physiological level. We feel a certain way, and then we forget even why we were afraid to begin with. We're just now, it's actually, and this is the other thing that science shows, neuroscience says, we are addicted to those chemicals. Just like someone who would be addicted to a drug that they just know is not good for them, or drinking too much, not good for us. Well, why can't we just stop it? And it's because there's this impulse, a drive, a baser drive we feel so addicted to. And so we are addicted to our fear. The chemistry of our fear. And that's why it's really, really hard to get out of the old habits and the old identity, to break up with the old identity of ourselves.
Yeah. So what are some of the things then that we can focus on to work that? Because, I mean, when you say that it's an addiction, right, I'm sort of thinking to myself, okay, I experience fear like anyone else does, sometimes more than other times. And there are certain things that I can do for myself that relieves that fear, or still have it and just face it hands on and just do it anyway. I've never really thought about it that it may be an addiction to that particular fear, right? That keeps us in that place. I've always thought that when we have that fear, it keeps us in a place of safety and comfort, and therefore we're not moving. But for me personally, keep that thought. For me personally, I feel, for example, I've always been afraid of heights. And I know it's also, and this may be a bit out there for some people, I also know it's related to some past lives, being afraid of height. Now, I do face it. It keeps coming up. So there's still something there that probably I need to work on more. However, I do certain things, such as climbing the Harbour Bridge here in Sydney. Or a few years ago with a group of friends, we went to the rainforest and we did what they call jungle surfing. So you go up on a tree, you're in a harness, and you swing from one tree to the next, and you're about 20, 30 meters above ground, right? Now, I'm petrified. Tears running down my face, but having the right people around me, I do it. I had my best friends there, and my partner, so they guided me through it, and I did it, and it was fun in the end. Harbour Bridge, I climbed it with my father. He was there, safety, support. I did it, right? Takes me a longer, but I do it anyway, because I feel I don't want that to hold me back. So to talk about it as in it's addictive, perhaps from a body perspective, I've never really looked at it that way. So it's a very interesting concept.
Right. And so I'm very intimate with addictions. I know addictions very well. My son's father died from addiction, so I got to witness it And then I also went through my own journey of having to overcome addictions. And so I actually realized the correlation early on, and then studying the neuroscience years later affirmed to me what I realized. You hit on a couple of things. First of all, comfort and safety. Yeah. So what's interesting about comfort and safety is that when we look at it from, when we talked about right relationships, right? Yeah. When we look at it from the relationship of being in the ego's needs, right? The ego needs familiar, it needs comfort, it needs safety. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It needs love, and it needs to feel important. But strictly speaking, safety and security are prime base needs for the ego, right? Mm. Now, your soul doesn't need safety. Your soul's not looking to stay safe. Mm-mm. Your soul is looking for purpose and meaning in life. Your soul is looking to individuate and express yourself in a new way. And when we override the drive, the baser ego drives for comfort and safety, we start to create new neural pathways to help us access a different part of our brain. Mm. And so we move from the amygdala, which is distrust. That's where that lives, by the way. Distrust lives in the amygdala. And we literally start to build a bridge with the activities you talked about. So it's like, I did it anyway. It doesn't matter if you weren't the first one to complete it. You don't have to win awards. You're just doing it to do something that overrides your fears, right? And what happens is you start to build neural pathways that tell your body, oh, it's okay, I didn't die. Yeah. Right? In that case. So scary. And as soon as you start to, the more often you familiarize yourself with what was once scary, the more you become comfortable with what was once scary. So you start to acclimate to the things you once had distrust for and fear for. And that's how you actually have those, you create new experiences that have reference points in your brain to say, oh, I'm familiar with this. It's actually not scary. I can do this. Mm. So that's one thing, because you can trust, if you've already done it before, then there's a part of you who's like, oh, I can do this again. I can trust that I can do this again. So the more and more and more you override that like paralyzing fear that wants to stop you from doing the thing that was scary, then you're able to build those pathways. But then there's another thing, and this is really something that is also a skill to align with your soul's needs. And it's actually activating when you're, in a state of distrust. The antidote is to activate your third eye. Wow. Yeah. And this is also what we learned in neuroscience principles, the neuroscience of creating change. And now when I say the third eye, I'm not referring to just the spiritual concept of it, although ancients taught us that there was this idea of a third eye. What we found is that there is, in fact, a place within the center of our mind, our physical brain. I shouldn't say the mind, because the mind is consciousness, but the brain itself, and it has a retina. And that retina allows us to see possibilities. It allows us to access the higher brain, the higher mind, our executive decision maker. And that part of us is higher consciousness. Yeah. And when we're there, we're able to imagine possibilities that maybe we didn't consider before, because it moves beyond familiar, or it moves beyond experience, and it moves into the realm of possibilities. So when you activate the third eye, you can see that there's alternative outcomes versus death. I'm afraid of dying. I'm afraid of falling. I'm afraid of failure. I'm afraid of whatever, fill in the blank of being. Most people are just truly afraid of their power. But the secret to activating the third eye resides in our heart.
Yes.
Our physical and energetic heart, right? So our heart center, as well as our physical heart, are actually involved in the activation process.
Yeah, yeah.
So the activation of your third eye has to do with trust from your heart, because your heart's like, listen, it's your wiser self. It's the grandmother,
Yes.
the owl, and she's like, or he is like, hey, I have faith that something good will come of this. And we don't have to even know what that outcome is. We just have to have faith that something good will come of it. And in that moment, it's excitement. Now look, excitement and fear are like kissing cousins. They're so closely resemblant in the body. Like physiologically, you might experience fear in a very similar way as you experience excitement, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, because it creates this adrenaline.
Exactly, yes. Adrenaline, exactly. So you can start to create a new story in your head around that feeling that you once called fear. And you can say, oh, what if this feeling is actually excitement? What if it's not fear? So you start to reframe in your head, but you come from your heart with it, because it's like this idea that, you know, you have the ability to recreate your reality, and there's truth in that. And that comes from logical thinking as well as intuitive sensing. And so it's this marriage between the two, right? And so it's an interesting experience, because then what happens is this: there's this energetic synchronization that happens. The physiological opening up of your heart center activates the oxytocin, which is a new hormone that's involved. Have you heard of oxytocin before?
Yes, but I'm not quite sure what it does and how it works.
It's the love hormone.
Okay, there you go.
So cortisol is that fear hormone. Cortisol is that thing that causes our brain to shut down. It causes our fight or flight response. It causes us to hold ourselves back. It causes inflammation in the body. It shuts down our DNA, all of those things. Whereas oxytocin washes away all of the inflammation. It activates the dormant DNA. It turns on and potentiates. That's the word I want you to think about. It potentiates the DNA that has yet to be expressed. So it's what's possible. It allows for, I should say, what's possible. And oxytocin, the love hormone, is an opportunity to really experience yourself in a more harmonious, synchronized state. So we can call it the flow state. We can call it, well, in sync. What else? We can call it coherence, right? In coherence, when your heart and your head are communicating in sync, you are coherent, which is a quality of nature, right? And it sounds like coherence sounds harmonious. It actually is a frequency. It's picked up as a tune or a key that is like experienced in a positive way. Make sense? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm just making some notes on the go.
I can see.
I love this concept. Really, really love it. It's fantastic. It's almost like you're taking spirituality and everything that comes with that and relate that back to the body to really have that experience from a body point of view. So it's almost like you're making it more tangible in that way.
Thank you for saying that, Bianca, because I actually, one of the things that I've recognized for myself, I've worked in the clinical setting. I actually used to train physicians on the science of nutraceuticals and how to heal the body with natural medicine. So I'm a big believer in understanding the science of things, but I'm also a trained spiritual teacher and healer in the mystery schools.
Yes, yes, awesome, love it.
So I have these like two different worlds, and in truth, I really didn't know how to walk those worlds for a long time. I felt polarized, right? It was like this, my secret. When I was working with doctors, my secret was, I do exorcisms. Right? Like, I communicate with spirit. Secrets. I'm not telling you guys that. No. And when I was in the world of the spiritual teachers that I worked with, it was like, I am trying to scientifically understand all of this. And so it was this interesting polarity that kept me feeling separate. Yeah. And it kept me feeling isolated and uncertain and unclear and disconnected. And I really lived that for a while, and I was distorted in my life for a really long time of not knowing who was I. And then all of a sudden I really started, only in the past few years have I really started to see how the two marry, and how actually both of these worlds affirm one another. And you can really start to understand the nature of God when you understand the science of nature.
Yes, yes.
It's just this, it's just this interesting kind of revelation that has only occurred to me because I was willing to walk both of those paths, right? And explore both of those paths. Yeah. And the other thing too, I was in the realm of a lot of people who lived in the world of spiritual teachings. Maybe you can relate to this. I felt that they were so disconnected from the physicality, that they weren't grounded in their teachings, and they really didn't, like, the rubber didn't meet the road, right? And then in the other world, where I was working with people who were stuck in their head, they were so linear in their thinking, they were so logical in all the ways that they dealt with things, that they never felt their nature, their true nature. Yes. And so they tried to deal with life, deal with healing problems from a Newtonian principle, like from the physical realm of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So there's this new concept. Actually, there's an author that I'm a fan of, and he created something called potentiation. It's about activating your DNA. His name is Saul Bluckman. And he actually talks about this in his book, Potentiate Your DNA. And he talks about this journey or evolution, if you would, of these concepts. And he says that we went from living in the physical to living in the mental, right? It's like, oh, my thoughts control my reality. And now we're living in the super consciousness of like, oh, there's actually... there's another dimension that I exist in, and that part of me is influencing my reality. I'm not willing myself to change from this level of consciousness. I'm opening up to a higher realm, or to myself in a higher realm, allowing for that to inspire and inform me so that I can make decisions from that higher place of awareness.
Yes. Oh, beautiful. Oh, that's amazing. Just sort of digesting all of that, because it's so resonating for me. And I hope, for a lot of other viewers as well, because it really makes that distinct connection to us as a human being, and then also the spiritual being that we are over here. And I think that's really the gap that we're missing, to have the ability to be in that higher space. And to lift ourselves up to that level, to be able to tap into it, to say, how can I utilize that now in the present moment? And what you said earlier about, having people that are very much in that mind space, or the spiritual teachers that are too much over here. I've certainly experienced that when I was still working in corporate, when I was discovering all my spirit abilities, and to compartmentalize it in my brain. How does this all work? What is all of that? So I was analyzing it till the cows came home and never really got an answer around it, because in the end, it just is what it is. and it's an extra source that, you know, we can tap into. But it has caused a lot of anxiety for me in that time, because dealing with high executives, you know, all these egos, all working very much in that mindset that you referred to earlier. Yet here am I'm standing over here going, but I've got also all this other stuff happening. But my mind was still over there going, but I need to analyze this and I need to know about that and how does that work? And wow, you know, it was like a whole spinning world that was just evolving. And then in the end, when you find that balance and, oh, hang on a minute, I can actually combine the two and I know how to merge them together.
Right.
And then teaching that to the leaders in those workplaces, not from that fluff space of, oh, you have to connect and be spiritual and go into the higher. No, it's more about, let's look at how can we lead better from a place of compassion and empathy, and tap into our hearts to lead from that heart-centered space, right? So then I learned how to adjust that as well at the same time. So hearing you talking about it from that scientific point of view, it just makes sense. It's really, oh God, awesome stuff. Yeah.
Isn't it amazing? You know, we're living in a time where finally we're starting to corroborate the ancient wisdom teachings. There's enough clinical data out there that is affirming, like scientific research is affirming what, you know, the Buddha would teach. Yes. Or, you know, what our wise ancestors had to say about who we really are. And so, you know, we can't continue to stay separated, you know, especially, you know, you just mentioned leaders in business. We're both spiritual beings, and it doesn't matter. It's not a religious dogmatic way of dealing with spirit. It's just the reality of our nature. And then the physical part of us, and we have a job to do in the corporate world or in business or whatever we're doing in life. And how do we allow for both to influence our decisions and our engagements, how we communicate? I think that's also an important thing to remember, you know, leading from a place, that heart-centered place that you just talked about, but activating this is what they found, when you activate somebody's potential, right, which is a part of their brain, physiologically, it's this part of the brain, it's the prefrontal cortex, you open up to new ideas, to creative potential, to what's known as the creative genius within the person. So as a leader, if you know the skill of being able to do that, right, because it is a skill, if you can help someone and bring out their best, then it's in your favor, because the outcome will be you'll have their best self working for you.
Yes. Yeah.
That great? And the person will be so happy to be working with that company because they'll feel at their best. So it's a win-win.
Yeah.
And love how that works.
That's amazing. And not just in the workplace. I recognize that can, you know, that works really well for us personally as well, to have our personal relationships too.
Totally. Interpersonal relationships. Yeah. Like in a household or with friendships. Yeah. Wow. It just so happens that for the majority of people, they spend the most amount of time with coworkers and colleagues. Yeah.
Yes.
But for those who don't, it does absolutely apply in all of our relationships. And as I always like to remind people, the very first relationship we have is with ourselves. And in the same way, we have this obligation and an opportunity to have a new conversation with ourselves. And to engage ourselves in a way that really helps us to open up and activate what's possible within our own self. And that's our self-talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So it's all skills, you know, and this is the thing. And this is what I didn't know when I was suffering, and what people don't realize is that all of our the majority, I don't want to say all, the majority of our health issues, the majority of our relationship challenges, the majority of why we're stuck, the reasons why we're stuck in life, all come down to how the relationships that we have, right? How we relate and interact, how we think and believe and behave with what, with our life.
Absolutely.
And so that's what this is. That's my passion, it's why I do what I do. I love it when people have miracles. And by the way, that's the other thing. It's like, people will experience miracles. One of the, I shouldn't say one, many. There's been people who have had things that were like medical miracles, just doing this work of being able to open up the realms of possibility and connecting with their higher self for healing. There's things that have happened in relationships that we would call it, a miracle. It's just, we're only limited in our imagination.
Definitely.
It is. Sorry, I'm distracted because my dog is literally, he's got my hand, his paw is in my hand right now. He won't let it go. Speaking of relationships, it's just I in the office today, and he's like, "Mama, I need some attention."
No, he's actually saying that he's supporting you on your journey, and he understands where you've been and where you are right now, and he's really holding the space for you.
Oh, that's so touching. I'm so touched by that. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. Thank you. Oh my, thank you, Loki. You're so good. Oh, that's.
I can literally see the energy coming from him to you, like that love, support, compassion. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, amazing. Very beautiful.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, sweet. Thank you. Yeah. Very touched. I wasn't expecting that. As you can see.
Me neither. It just happens. He was pretty strong to say you need to tell her that. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. He's beautiful. Beautiful boy. Been around for a while.
I think so. I do. I actually I asked him today if he was the reincarnation of my old dog. I was like, did you come back as another dog from another dog? So anyway, I went off track. So we just covered a lot of ground, as you can see in this conversation. But I want to kind of anchor it in so that people can really take away some of the key concepts that were discussed from our conversation today. And, recognizing, like you said, we all have our issues. Life is not about perfection. This journey that we're on, this like whole seeking for wholeness isn't about perfect. It's like, how do we relate with our challenges in a new way? How do we change the relationship and the feelings and the way that we show up when we're challenged, and literally allow for our higher consciousness to, I actually see it as like coming in and animating us so that we can live from that place and create from that place. Recognizing that fear shouldn't be what holds us back, but it should be what we overcome, our fears and worries. And that life purpose, that desire that we all have, like we want more meaning in life, we want more meaningful relationships, and we want a sense of purpose. And it comes from us allowing for this process to move out of the fear and into the realm of possibilities.
Beautiful. So is there anything that you want to share that people can work on straight away for them? The one little nugget perhaps that they can take away and implement?
Yeah, I would say, actually I have
Or you have a couple.
I have one thing that I teach people, that how to remember what to do in the moment you're triggered. That feeling where you're like, you want to, the fight or flight response kicks in, where you're like, oh my God, I'm angry and I want to attack. Yes. Or I'm frightened and I want to run away. The one thing I want you to remember, this is all you need to remember. I'm laughing because of how I started. I want you to remember to F it. F it as in three F's. Feel it, forgive it, free it. So remember, F it. Feel it, forgive it, free it. So in the moment you feel that trigger, you feel challenged energetically, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I want you to feel the feeling that you're having. Don't hide from it. Don't deny it. Don't try to judge it and make it wrong or even criticize yourself for having it. Even if you've had it 1,000 times before, it doesn't matter. Feel it. Be with that feeling in a way like you've never been with that feeling before. Like, have a love relationship with it. It's like, okay, I feel you. I'm here for you. I know you're in pain. I feel you. Okay? Number one, feel it. Number two, forgive it means forgive everything that's involved with that. I forgive myself for repeating this pattern. I forgive the perpetrator for, putting me into this predicament, right? I forgive whatever and whoever needs to be forgiven in this moment, and literally feel the feelings of forgiveness now, because we're still, remember, feeling it is important. And then freeing it is literally to not entertain that impulse anymore. So for instance, when you said you felt the fear response, when you wanted to stay comfortable, when you wanted to stay safe, but you chose to do what you needed to do anyway, in that moment, you literally create a discharge of energy, because that's a choice point. Mm-hmm. So when you free it, you make a new decision to do something different than what you once did. That's it. You create a new energetic release. All right. So F it. When you're triggered, F it. Feel it. Forgive it. Free it.
Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful.
It works magically. I'm telling you. Play with this. Like, for anyone who's listening, I'm going to invite you to experiment with it. Play around with it. Have fun with it. And see what comes of it. And then tell me. I'm always curious about what people experience. Like, type me a letter and say, you're not going to believe this.
Fantastic.
I want to know your stories. I'm keen to hear.
Fantastic. Wow. Thank you, Shawna. Absolutely amazing to have you here. Your wisdom is just out of this world, and your energy is so loving and kind and warming. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I didn't say this earlier, but if people are curious about how to use the tools that I provide, I do have that free gift that I am offering for your viewers. And they can access that. I'm not sure how you share that, but it's the tools and templates, and I do some, I verbally walk people through in a video, and that can help you and meaning the viewers that are watching now. So feel free to take advantage of that free gift that I share.
Beautiful.
So use these tools.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a pleasure. And I'm so grateful that we had the opportunity to connect, Bianca. I'm loving
definitely.
This conversation, and I'm sure we'll be connected for future conversations.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt.